The coffee cup hit the pavement inches from the old man's feet, splashing hot liquid across his worn boots, and Diana Harlow didn't even pause her stride. She had seen him digging through the trash can outside her office building, his gray beard matted with rain, his hands trembling as he searched for something, anything, to fill the hollow ache in his stomach. And instead of walking past in silence, she had stopped just long enough to sneer down at him and tell him that people like him were a stain on the city, that he should be ashamed to breathe the same air as decent, hard-working people. She didn't know his name. She didn't care to ask. All she saw was a dirty old man rummaging through garbage, and all she felt was disgust. What she could not have known, standing there in her tailored navy suit with her Mercedes idling at the curb, was that this single moment of cruelty would unravel everything she had spent her life building. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that we should treat every person we meet with dignity no matter their circumstances, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this video with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so you never miss a story like this one. The old man's name was Walter Green, though nobody on that street had bothered to learn it in years. Once, Walter had been a structural engineer, the kind of man who signed off on bridges and hospital wings, who came home every evening to a wife who kissed his cheek and a daughter who ran to greet him at the door. But life has a cruel way of dismantling even the sturdiest foundations. His wife had passed from cancer 8 years ago, and the medical bills had swallowed his savings whole. His daughter, grieving in her own broken way, had drifted across the country and stopped answering his calls. The company he'd given 30 years to closed its doors during a merger, and at 61, no one was hiring an engineer whose skills, they said, were outdated. One missed rent payment became 3, and before Walter understood what was happening, he was sleeping in shelters, then in doorways, then wherever the rain wasn't quite as merciless. He had learned to swallow his pride along with his hunger, because pride, he discovered, could not fill an empty stomach. That morning, Walter had gone 3 days without a real meal. His hands shook not from cold but from hunger, a hunger so deep it made his vision blur at the edges. When he saw the half-eaten sandwich someone had discarded near the top of the bin, he reached for it the way a drowning man reaches for driftwood. And that was the exact moment Diana Harlow decided to make an example of him, loudly, publicly, in front of strangers holding umbrellas who looked away in discomfort but said nothing. She called him disgusting. She called him a burden on society. She told him people like him chose this life, as though anyone would choose to feel this kind of desperation. Walter said nothing back. He simply lowered his eyes, the same way he had learned to do 100 times before, and let the words wash over him like the rain, because arguing would cost him energy he didn't have. What Diana didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that her entire empire was built on borrowed time. She was the CEO of Harlow Capital Ventures, a firm she had inherited from her father and expanded through what she called shrewd business instincts, but what her employees quietly called ruthlessness. She had spent the last 2 years aggressively acquiring smaller companies, gutting their staff, and reselling the assets for profit, all while parading herself at charity galas in gowns that cost more than most people's yearly salaries. But beneath the polished exterior, Harlow Capital was hollow. Diana had made a catastrophic bet on a real estate development months earlier, sinking nearly everything into a project that depended entirely on a zoning approval that had not yet gone through. Her board didn't know the full extent of it. Her investors didn't know. Only her lawyer and her accountant understood how thin the ice beneath her had truly become. That very afternoon, only hours after she humiliated Walter on the sidewalk, Diana received a phone call that made the blood drain from her face. The city council had voted against the zoning permit her entire project depended on, citing environmental concerns that her team had assured her would never surface. In an instant, the development was dead, and with it, nearly every dollar she had leveraged to keep her company afloat. Her phone would not stop ringing for the rest of the day. Investors demanding answers. Her board calling an emergency meeting. Her bank threatening to freeze accounts tied to unpaid loans she had used company assets to secure. By evening, as the rain continued to fall over the city, Diana sat alone in her glass office on the 32nd floor, watching her life's work collapse in real time on a laptop screen, and for the first time in years, she understood the sensation of true, bottomless fear. It would have been easy for the story to end there, with Diana simply losing everything as cosmic punishment for her cruelty, but life rarely deals in such simple justice, and this story is not really about her downfall. It is about what happened to Walter later that same night. A young woman named Sophia Reyes, who ran a small non-profit shelter 2 blocks from where the confrontation happened, had witnessed the entire incident from across the street. She had watched Walter's face, the way he absorbed the insults without flinching, the practiced stillness of a man who had endured far worse than words. Something about his composure, his quiet dignity in the face of degradation, stayed with her all day. That evening, instead of going home, Sophia walked the streets near the office building until she found him huddled beneath an overpass, and she offered him something he hadn't received in longer than he could remember, a warm meal, a dry blanket, and the simple question of his name, asked with genuine curiosity rather than pity. Walter told her everything that night, the bridges he had built, the daughter he had lost touch with, the wife he still spoke to in his dreams. Sophia listened without judgment, and when she learned he had once been a structural engineer, she remembered that her shelter's aging building was in desperate need of renovation, tied up for months because no licensed engineer would volunteer their time for free. She asked Walter if he would be willing to look at the blueprints, just to offer his opinion, even informally. For the first time in years, someone had asked Walter not what he needed, but what he could offer, and something inside him that had gone quiet for a long time began, slowly, to stir back to life. Over the following weeks, Walter's assessment of the shelter's structural issues caught the attention of a retired colleague who still remembered his name from an old engineering journal. That connection led to a temporary consulting contract, then a small apartment through a veterans and elder assistance program, then a slow, deliberate rebuilding of a life that had been reduced to nothing. Meanwhile, Diana Harlow's company filed for restructuring within the month, her assets liquidated, her name dragged through financial news as a cautionary tale of over-leveraged ambition. She lost the Mercedes, the corner office, the gowns, and the gala invitations, and in the wreckage of her old life, she found herself, ironically, standing in line at a community assistance center, the same kind of place she once believed only weak people needed. It was there, months later, that she saw him again. Walter, wearing a simple but clean-collared shirt, volunteering his time reviewing safety reports for the very center she now depended on. He recognized her immediately, and though every instinct told her to look away in shame, she found herself walking toward him instead, offering an apology so quiet it was almost lost in the noise of the room. Walter did not gloat. He did not remind her of what she had said. He simply nodded, told her everyone deserves a second chance to see people clearly, and asked if she needed help filling out her paperwork. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment, because it truly means the world and helps this channel keep telling stories that matter. And before you go, I have one small request. Comment the word kindness if you believe everyone, no matter how far they've fallen, deserves to be seen with compassion rather than judgment. Diana never forgot that day in the rain, and neither did Walter, but where one had lost everything in a single afternoon, the other had spent his whole life quietly proving that dignity cannot be stripped away by circumstance, only forgotten by those too blind to see it.